this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. Today, of course, June 6th, 1944 to June 6th, 2014. And that's when we're recording the program here, Friday, June 6th. And the question, of course, for D-Day, why were we not celebrating this in 2012? The question of the second front in Europe, and in particular in Western Europe, not in North Africa, not the Italian campaign, especially the way the Italian campaign was conducted, not a Balkans campaign, but the second front in Western Europe. And the fact that this was delayed, we have to point out that D-Day was not, repeat, not the turning point of World War II. In Europe, on land, this was the Battle of Stalingrad. And there is no gainsaying that. Of course, in the Pacific, it was the Battle of Midway. In North Africa, it was El Alamein. But in the principal world theater of Europe, it was Stalingrad. So that leaves us with, why no second front in 1942 or 1943, only in the middle of 1944? And the answer is the crack-brain scheming of Sir Winston Churchill, who wanted to bleed the Soviets white and then turn around and complain that they had come all the way to Berlin and Prague and come so far into Europe. And he, even at the Tehran conference, he was trying to scheme to get an invasion into what he called the soft underbelly of Europe, meaning the Balkans. He wanted to invade Yugoslavia and have everything come in through the port of Trieste up a single road, which I saw some years ago, more or less in its World War II condition. So this was geopolitics of the British type, so much so that there were reports of a meeting of von Ribbentrop, Nazi foreign minister, with Molotov in late 1943 or 1944 because of the impotence of the Allies on the European continent. Remember that de Gaulle had proposed in June 1940, 4 years before this, de Gaulle had recommended a national redoubt. And the national redoubt would have allowed French forces to remain probably in Brittany or Normandy, and then be reinforced by the British, and then by the United States. This was a definite possibility. This was ruled out by the fascist Marshal Pétain when he took power June 20th, 21st, 22nd of 1940. So the big question is, why was this not done much earlier? The United States had outlined a proposal called Operation Sledgehammer, if I recall correctly. Operation Sledgehammer would have been to seize an area along the far western coast of France. La Rochelle would have been another possibility, but I think probably Normandy, Brittany would have been the principal choices. And then defend that. Use strategic bombing, use your fighter aircraft, use your naval resources, and engage in that kind of fight early on. And the goal of all this is to end such a war, to end the war and to carry out the liberation then of Western Europe, but at the same time to relieve the pressure on the Soviets, not to maximize it, which seemed to always be the goal of Churchill. And, of course, this might then have led to a division of Europe after the war somewhat further east, and therefore a more equal balance of some sort, right? If that's what you were concerned with, then you should have been attacking already in 1942. And the fact that it was then not done in 1943, we can see the entire story of this in a very interesting book. Everybody should read it. It's called As He Saw It by Elliot Roosevelt, the son of Franklin D. Roosevelt, This outlines the clashes between Roosevelt and Churchill. They're very divergent views on imperialism, the future of the British Empire, future of India, and so forth. And I think he includes the Atlantic Charter meeting of August 1941, certainly includes the Casablanca Conference, and then the Tehran Conference, which was the first time in 1943 that Roosevelt gets a chance to meet Stalin. And as he writes, the contortions that Churchill would go through to try to postpone or simply to call off the invasion in Western Europe into northern France. This was, of course, quite obvious to all. So this unreconstructed imperialist, and that, I think, is the prelude to what happens today. Now, even though Nazism and fascism were defeated in 1945, several hundred miles to the east, they're still alive and well, and the Nazis and the fascists are attacking the city of Slavyansk. The Kiev fascist clique, once again, lashing out. Poroshenko's inauguration is tomorrow, and there's apparently an attempt. They want to give him the gift of the city of Slavyansk. Well, Slavyansk has become the Guernica of our time, except that all of the left liberal poobahs, or most of them, are completely indifferent to this. The Ukrainian forces, the fascist-led forces, have absorbed a rather humiliating defeat earlier in the week, but now they've got some tanks and they're attacking. And this is, frankly, anybody's guess. We've just also seen the diplomacy around this, right? This childish, hysterical fit by Kerry and Obama that they think they can isolate Putin. Putin, of course, has just concluded the $400 billion deal with the world's most populous nation, China. You won't die of solitude and loneliness if you're allied with China. And that's $400 billion plus the $70 billion in upfront investment. And we've also just seen Putin meeting with President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan, one of the smartest, most intelligent leaders in the world, been around for about 25 years, knows what he's doing. And Lukashenko of Belarus, of White Russia, they have now founded the customs union, and I think as time goes on, that may be more attractive than many would assume at this point, especially when you start reading what the IMF killer austerity will look like, the genocidal austerity program. And remember, when you look at those conditions, right, the idea that you're going to loot the social insurance of Ukraine, you're going to loot the Black Earth region, you're going to loot the pipeline system, you're going to loot the coal and steel of the Krivoy Rog, Donetsk, Donbass. That is primitive accumulation. And that is what Monsieur Piketty does not seem to understand, that capital, the accumulation of capital, routinely outdistances the productive base. One of the reasons why finance capital deregulated is an impossible way to organize world production and society is simply that they don't understand the difference between productivity, production, and pure speculation. And when you see the speculative property titles, and the derivatives are, of all of them, the absolute worst, when you have 2 quadrillion minimum of bankrupt derivatives compared to a very low level of world production, the overhang is called fictitious capital. And the fictitious capital, those claims have got to be paid out of primitive accumulation. That is, looting, killing people, right? Sacking, and so forth. And we'll be back with more on that here on World Crisis Radio in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're coming from a quite successful appearance at the Left Forum in New York City. And the Left Forum was held at the John Jay College this year. And the event that I attended, along with Joe Calhoun of Colorado and Tom Kiley of Brooklyn, who does the INN World Report. Very well attended. Standing room only. The room was absolutely packed, 60 people plus. That seemed to compare favorably with most of these events. Of course, you can't compete with the foundation-funded poobahs like Amy Goodman. But other than that, a very respectable, formidable turnout. So the talk that I gave will be it'll be available, we hope, quite soon in a facsimile version. We had some technical problems with our recording equipment, and I'm wondering if you happen to attend that, right? I saw some people there who were filming the whole thing with cell phones, and I saw another guy had a rather exotic and modern recording device there. I'm wondering if you can let us know about it, because we'd like to have the actual viva voce version of it, but there will be the content version, and the slides will be, we hope, available soon. And we apologize for that problem, but of course we're not foundation funded, so we have to do things more or less on a kind of a shoestring. So Putin in Western Europe. Apparently Putin now talked to Obama for 15 minutes in Normandy today on the margins of this celebration. Of course, Queen Elizabeth II was there, dragging along Prince Philip. The Russian television RT has done a very good job in illuminating Prince Philip's Nazi connections. And, of course, the real big problem is that Queen Elizabeth's uncle, Edward VIII, was an active Nazi supporter, close friend of Hitler, and had to be dumped. That whole story with the divorcee and Mrs. Simpson was simply a cover for the fact that he was much too much in Hitler's pocket. And had Hitler invaded Great Britain and succeeded, then there's no doubt that Edward VIII would have become the regent or the ruler of the Nazi puppet state of Great Britain. So that's somewhat embarrassing for them. There were then yesterday meetings at the G7. That was on Wednesday and Thursday in Brussels. But we've also had Putin meeting Merkel, Putin meeting Hollande, Putin meeting Cameron shooting his mouth off. There was talk of an ultimatum by the United States and Great Britain, which is to say, Putin, stop the destabilization of Ukraine within 1 month or face more sanctions. I think it is extremely unwise to launch ultimatums to the Russian Federation. And I think this gives us a new principle of international law. In other words, is organizing the destabilization of a country, is that now going to be promoted to an act of aggression? It may well be. But this would also then include, if you had the United States attempting to organize a color revolution, which they do all the time, that a color revolution could be grounds for sanctions. In other words, if you've got the U.S. organizing a color revolution against some country, could that country then turn around and embargo the U.S., declare sanctions? Could they default on their debt? Suppose the U.S. tries to organize a color revolution in Venezuela, which I think has been going on now for about a year. Could Venezuela then turn around and say, guess what? You're destabilizing us with your color revolution. Everybody knows what these are. Therefore, we will not pay. In Poland, Obama made some very unwise, intemperate statements. I think this is because Obama feels like he's under attack on the home front for many reasons, having to do with Syria, having to do with Iran, having to do with Ukraine. Some of this is summarized in the Bergdahl incident, which I'll try to talk about here in just a minute. But you had the idea that he was attempting to ratchet up the rhetoric, partly to play to his Polish hosts, of course, but I think partly also to try to diminish the effectiveness of the rhetoric of the Republican warmongers. Now, the Republicans are out in the open as warmongers, right? You've got Rand Paul, who used to object to drones. Rand Paul wants the 5 people in the Bergdahl deal assassinated by drones. Rand Paul has now responded to the warmonger shift of the Republican Party. He's tailing after it. So you libertarians, you put that in your pipe and smoke it, right? Your little man there turns out to be absolutely unprincipled scoundrel and adventurer, as I have always argued. But Obama, when Obama gave that speech with in Poland, right, in Warsaw, it seemed to me that his warnings about Ukraine and so forth, the posturing that he went through, that was a new level. And again, could be Poland, but it could be the putschists here at home that have got him worried. So that's Obama's tour, and of course now there's all sorts of talk about increasing the NATO presence in Eastern Europe. This is extremely unwise, and it's also expensive, and it will necessarily lead to a backlash. I think there's a general awareness that Russia will not and cannot tolerate Ukraine entering NATO. Poroshenko seems to have interpreted his election victory, if that's what it was, with other candidates beaten, terrorized, forced to drop out, with the threat of the opposition Communist Party to be banned. That was in the middle of the campaign, as we saw assassinations, kidnappings, and genocidal events like the Odessa massacre of May 2nd, all of that in the middle of the campaign. But Poroshenko thinks he has a mandate, but it's a mandate to kill. So he has, since the so-called Ukrainian election, he has escalated that attack with dire consequences. Now, the Ukrainian force is doing rather poorly. 6 Ukrainian aircraft and helicopters shot down just in the past few days, and quite a number of tanks seem to have been knocked out. So that's Ukraine. We have this incident in which a U.S. spy plane was buzzed by a Russian jet fighter, and we've also got some U.S. forces in the Black Sea. Secretary of Defense Hagel near the coast of Romania, but in the Black Sea, visiting a Aegis cruiser in that area. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Okay, welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. To keep up with all of this, head for Tarpley.net. Quite a proliferation of media appearances in the past week. Press TV, Tom Kiley's radio show, Rents, all kinds of topics. Some of them we'll illustrate with guests here. I would recommend that Obama fire Kerry and fire Rice. And if you want to get out of the Ukraine crisis, blame the Eurogharks. No, they have no constituency, right? Blame these shadowy individuals, Van Rompuy, the broken man, Rompuy, and get rid of Barroso and Olli Rehn and that awful dumb cow, Baroness, what's her name, right? The European Ashton, right? The European foreign policy lady. And just say, look, you blew it. You mismanaged everything. You guys are hopeless. You're basket cases, not ready for prime time, and what have you. So now, Russia hardly isolated. Now, concerning the general foreign policy picture, we got to develop a picture of the U.S. position in a certain crisis, right? Humiliated by a number of events, and then the attempts of this flailing, incompetent ruling class that we have to get back into the picture. First of all, we want to send our congratulations to General Sisi of Egypt. I think this promises stable government, and I urge him, stick to that election promise of 1 million houses on top of the 1 million already going, almost 1 million every year after that, and think about other great projects of infrastructure. How about that Cairo to Cape Town railway? And how about linking the Nile with the Congo through building the obvious canals there in Central Africa? Similarly, we congratulate President Assad of Syria. The U.S. coverage here, I could read you some headlines from the Washington Post, that the outcome, and not just the outcome, but the turnout and the comments and just the general atmosphere of the Syrian election, they say, illustrates the sway of Assad. And this is not sway that he's jiggling. It's that his power has increased. The ability of Assad to assert power over the country, now that Homs has been liberated, Aleppo largely liberated. The perspective is that the terrorist bandits, right, the terrorist rebels, will be driven out, and the blessings of orderly government and normal middle-class civilization can once again return to Syria. And, of course, the U.S. imperialist party doesn't like this. Let's focus for a second on the death squad expert, and that is Ambassador Ford. We know him. He's the pupil, he's the star pupil up to now of Negroponte, whose name is so indissolubly linked to the death squads in Latin America. Ford, of course, who had been the U.S. ambassador to Syria, came out with what is described as a scathing critique of Obama and says that he quit because he could no longer support the policies of Obama. Right here, power of Assad seen in election. Assad sway evident as Syrians vote, and Robert Ford, ex-U.S. ambassador to Syria, delivers a scathing attack on Obama in a PBS interview. He says, we let Syria go from a peaceful Arab Spring, this is all mythology, of course, to a full-fledged armed rebellion. We were constantly behind the curve, which is why we have extremist threats in our own country, right? An American suicide bomber has apparently gone into action. So that's what you get, Ford, when you mess around with them. Now, that's Ford. Now, this gets us into the bigger picture, right? When you look at this Bergdahl stuff, you have to realize that this is quite possibly an attempted warmonger coup in the making, right? We're being told that there's military anger. We're told that there is seething resentment in the armed forces against Obama. We're told by Colonel Peters, or Peterson, whatever his name is, this character, neocon, Islamophobe, Fox News commentator, points out or suggests that Obama thinks that desertion is like skipping a class, Gender Studies 101, or whatever it is. I think that what you're seeing is the mobilization of the Whitewatergate and Clintongate networks with this guy Turley, the lawyer from George Washington University. He was one of the leading advocates of impeaching Clinton for perjury back in 1999. Turley has now come out of the woodwork. He'd been out there advocating polygamy, helping the Mormon gang, but now he's back. He wants Obama to be, prosecuted, impeached. You've got Lindsey Grahamnesty, as they call him. Lindsey Graham, he's built his career on the impeachment of Clinton in South Carolina, right? He was in the House, I think, at the time. And similar people. So we've got the Clinton Gate and Islamophobic group mobilized to the maximum. And I think it has to do with they wanted the attack on Syria, and as Ford verbalizes, they still want to bomb Syria. Remember, we have the Anne-Marie Slaughter position, which is if you want to attack Putin, you've got to attack him in Syria because he's too strong in Ukraine, got to attack him in Syria. And we know from the interesting Washington Post coverage of some weeks back, Kerry, Samantha Power, General Petraeus, and General Keane over at the Institute for the Study of War, and therefore the entire Kagan family, including Brookings and American Enterprise Institute, they're all scheming like mad to get the attack on Syria, obviously also because of the Israeli influence. Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, her new book, Hard Choices, she says that on Iraq she got it wrong, but then she shows that in fact she has learned absolutely nothing, because she says, I got it wrong on Iraq, but now I'm for a hard line against Syria. She wants to attack Syria, there is no doubt. You put Hillary Clinton in there, you're going to get an attack on Syria. This makes Obama, I think, it presents him in a somewhat more positive light than many of the Obama haters and those blinded by racism or Obamacare or whatever else it is, right? The neocons and so forth, right? The non-sophisticated analysts. Hillary says that, of course, she reminds us that there was this time when she was up there with Panetta, with Petraeus, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and many others, trying to get Obama to bomb Syria, or at least to send sophisticated weapons to the terrorist rebels. Obama has blocked that at every turn, at least officially. Whatever a president can do to distance himself from it, Obama has done. And I think this is now seething. What's seething is the ruling class who want war. Therefore, impeachment is once again on the agenda. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. 6th of June. The second front finally opened 70 years ago. Should have been 1942, not 1944, or at least 1943. But that's the way it goes. Another factor that delayed it, of course, was the slowness of the U.S. mobilization was dictated, for example, a company like Alcoa that insisted on respecting its aluminum cartel with Nazi producers well into the war. And we have those quotes from George Seldes in his interesting books that if the U.S. loses World War II, they were saying at the time, we can thank Alcoa and their respect for their Nazi-controlled world aluminum cartel. Therefore, in France, to take one example, when de Gaulle was doing the necessary thing, ending the Algerian War, the French had been defeated in Indochina. Then in Algeria, they had to get out. There were huge vested interests. And we had a group of disgruntled military officers, the OAS, Organisation Armée Secrète. These were Vichy. These were neo-Nazis, neo-fascists. They were racist and so forth. We clearly have a version of this, and I've been pointing to this ever since Benghazi. The people who organized Benghazi, and I'd like to hear from General Ham and General Petraeus, first of all, that was an attempt to install Romney in the presidency. That was an October surprise, a little bit early in September. After that, large numbers of general officers, flag officers, were removed. This was a 7 days in May scenario, which has never come out. And I think we're looking at something possibly quite similar. Remember, Lewinsky time. What's Lewinsky time? Lewinsky came on the scene in January 1998. That is to say, in the year, let's say, Clinton had been reelected in 96. He was going to be in office until 01. So she comes on the scene in 1998. The impeachment is in December of 1998, and the trial is in January 1999. With Obama now, he was reelected in 2012. We're now in June 2014. You can see it's sort of comparable in terms of the time. Remember that the oligarchical control on the U.S. presidency in the first term since the imposition of the two-term limit by the Republicans through their hatred of Roosevelt, but the ruling class had deeper ideas. In the first term, it's the need to get reelected and the need for money to get reelected. The problem then is, how do you control the president in the second term? Well, Watergate, Clinton Gate, Iran-Contra, the general breakdown of Bush, media turning against Bush. All of those show that the control in the second term is done through scandal. But now are we getting to the point of something bigger and more dangerous? Let's just take a look at this Bergdahl stuff. My thesis, of course, is the Republican Party has to be destroyed in place. The Democratic Party will then split into two parts, Wall Street Democrats and populist labor Democrats. They would be the minority, but there you want to join with them and try to rebuild the country. Now, the pattern that we see is the Republicans. Look what they do. They sabotage government, and then they blame others for what happened, right? You take the Veterans Administration. Republican Congress won't vote enough money to hire new doctors, nurses, build new hospitals as their wars come to an end, and now they posture themselves, right? Shinseki is out and all the rest of this stuff. United States Postal Service. The Republicans refuse to relent on this Hastert time bomb, that 7 years have to be paid in terms of future pensions every 1 year, bankrupt it, privatize it, and so forth. Obamacare, they were clearly rooting for this to fail. I'm sure if we had a moonshot or something big going on with NASA, the Republicans would do everything they can to sabotage it. This is an oligarchical party of anti-national saboteurs. They are subversives. They are security risks. Now, what do you think happens if you tell them, oh, I'm giving you 30 days warning that there's going to be an attempt to free this guy Bergdahl? My bet is they would leak it. They would call in the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and God knows who and say, listen, make sure that guy never sees the light of day. The trooper would have been killed. It's not wise to tell these fascists, these subversives, these Republicans what you're going to do. You'd be crazy to tell them in advance, and now they complain. They would have leaked it to get Bergdahl liquidated, anything to attack Obama. And again, this is not just party politics in the sense of partisan competition for jobs. Remember, the Afghan war is ending. This is a defeat for the United States, clearly. The Bush neocons did it. Iraq is already over. That was a defeat. So you got two defeats in a row. Looks a little bit like Indochina, Algeria, compared to Iraq, Afghanistan. And these Republican subversives, hypocrites, what have you, they're all complaining. Look at what scoundrels they are. There was a secret briefing, and Saxby Chambliss came out, right? Who's Saxby Chambliss? You may remember how he got his job, for Max Cleland was the senator. He had left two legs and one arm on the battlefield in Vietnam. But this scoundrel, Saxby Chambliss, comes along and says, you're not patriotic because you don't support the Iraq war. Feinstein, Madame Oligarch on the Democratic side, right, doesn't care if you get your phone tapped, but if you tap her phone, that's a constitutional crisis. McCain, of course, the universal warmonger. Lindsey Graham talking about impeachment. We've already gone through him. His whole career built on Clinton Gate. Remember, the Constitution is categorical. The president is the commander-in-chief. So that's the end of that. It doesn't matter what some statute says. We have Mukasey, or Mukasey, as I call him. Mukasey says, even though he's attacking Obama, he says Obama's undoubtedly right, or probably right, that you can't impose this 30-day thing on the commander-in-chief. Even Krauthammer, I think Krauthammer tries to soften some of the GOP attacks because he sees the potential of a backlash against the Republican scoundrels on this issue. Krauthammer is essentially saying, my God, the American people are shocked by the gravity and the horror of all this. And let's see if we can get the enormity, the gravity. The American people are stunned and troubled, wondering what kind of man have we chosen to lead us. Now, let's look at some of the things going on. We mentioned Ford. We mentioned Turley. Let's look at the Secret Service, right? We know the Secret Service is a sewer when they're not visiting prostitutes or other hanky-panky. What is with this film of Obama exercising in Poland? That I would consider that a warning to Obama. In other words, this says if you can put a camera there, you can put a death-dealing robot, right? You can put some kind of an automatic shooting device, a bomb, whatever it is. The Secret Service, maybe they were visiting the prostitutki of Warsaw that night, but I think this is planned. The Secret Service has got to be broken up after Cancun, after these other events, and it will not do to install a woman and say that's the answer. It's going to have to take a wrecking crew to go in there. So I would say when you look at this entire picture, this is extremely troubling. And remember, the issue is on Syria, Obama, as far as Obama is concerned, he has not done any of the things they demand. Concerning Iran, we have that essay from Petraeus where Petraeus says, don't have a deal with Iran. This is going on in the background. In the background, the U.S. has also upped the conditions, right? This is now the P5+1. They now say Iran has 19,000 centrifuges, got to get rid of most of them. Iran will never accept. I think that's the reason Ayatollah Khamenei came out this week with that defiant speech, you will not break us. So I think that's going on. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Just wrapping up a couple of loose ends from the previous segments. You notice on this Bergdahl thing, there's obviously a swift boating machine that was ready to go. Those guys were fired up, ready to go. Who pays them? Who paid for that apparatus there? Concerning the Republicans, we know they are a demographically doomed party. They've got to take the White House in 2016, or that will be the end of them. They've got to impose a permanent austerity dictatorship. And remember, when you want to blame Bergdahl for getting people killed in Afghanistan, you got to go back to Bush, Cheney, Wolfowitz, Feith, Shulsky, Karl Rove, all those people. And remember that Ron Paul voted for the Afghan war. Yes, indeed he did. Go back and check. Authorization to use military force. Ron Paul was for it. So not interested in this. Notice that Rand Paul never went to the briefing and still shoots his mouth off. And Rand Paul is telling you drones should be used to kill those guys, and he's against the trade, right? Going along with the Republican base, and we'll have, perhaps we can work in a few more details about this. But now, let's switch to the much more promising domestic front and this very interesting Senate race in Nebraska. And here, of course, we're highly interested in the Tax Wall Street Party campaign of native Nebraskan from one of the old families of Nebraska, Dan Burdorf, who I hope is going to give us an update on all the interesting things going on there. Dan, welcome.
Hello, Webster. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. We hope to have you on every week until November.
Well, it's certainly my pleasure to speak to your audience and to you. Thank you very much.
Give us the update. Give us what's going on.
Well, Webster, I am running for Senate in Nebraska against Republican Ben Sass, and Ben Sass is sketchy on issues. It's not clear what his economic plan is, and I have a clear plan. My plan is an innovative program based on what's worked on in the past. Ben Sass is paid for by outside special interests in Washington, and I am not. Before the general election even started, Dr. Sass sold out to the Senate Conservatives Fund. Now,
who stands behind that?
The Senate Conservatives Fund? Would you repeat that, please?
Who stands behind the Senate Conservatives Fund?
Right. The Senate Conservatives Fund is made up of these extremely reactionary Republicans And you can find them at SenateConservativeFund.com, I believe. You can find out all about them. I'd like to compare Dr. Sass's issues with my own program, because Dr. Sass doesn't have a program. He is running on his image and issues focus tested by Washington think tanks to serve Wall Street. And I'm running on an economic populist platform that targets key areas to bring growth and development to Nebraska and the country. And you can see all my stuff at danfornebraska.com. But if you look at the economic issues, Dr. Sass is going to follow the economic ideas of the Senate Conservatives Fund PAC. And you can see, like I said, their ideas are on SenateConservatives.com, SenateConservatives.com. Dr. Sass is going to cut Social Security and Medicare. He says, quote, "We are guilty of generational theft," right? He says the old are stealing from the young, and he's creating an antagonism between these two groups of voters, between the young and the old, and he sees a future of generational debt. I want to preserve and protect workers and protect elderly and protect veterans and children and the sick with a strong social safety net. And Dr. Sass, he wants to eliminate or reduce food stamps if he's consistent with his biggest donors. And I will protect American workers from malnutrition. And Dr. Sass, his masters in Washington want to abolish the minimum wage. But I will protect... I will protect wages while my plan brings high-paying jobs back to America. Dr. Sass's supporters, they want to roll back regulations. And while some of these regulations are going too far in some areas, like the well-known issue of dust control on family farms, I want to protect citizens, consumers, and the economy. And I believe we have a right to clean water, to clean air, to clean soil, clean food, clean groundwater, which is very important in Nebraska, and clean and clear financial policies. And Dr. Sass has raised millions from people who want regressive taxes, shifting the burden on workers and families. I want the Wall Street sales tax. It's the fairest tax you can think of. It isn't a wealth tax or anything like this. It's a targeted tax on financial speculators that pushes investment back into productive industries. Now, Ben Sass is the candidate for looters. I'm the candidate for producers. And the whole point of austerity is to loot the economy once they crush it. And Dr. Sass...
Dan, I think this is excellent. Let me also just point out, right, this stuff about generational theft.
Yes.
In some ways, this is the oldest trick in the book, right? Divide and conquer, play young against old, men against women, whatever it is, city against country. And, of course, the irony is sitting in the middle. He wants to obviously cut the benefits of the old, duping the young, right, who will one day be old themselves.
Exactly.
But the idea is that in the middle of it all, Wall Street sits there and pays virtually no federal tax, no federal corporate income tax, and above all, no sales tax or fee of any kind on quadrillions of turnover, quadrillions that are not taxed.
And they're laughing all the way. And that's why the Wall Street sales tax is key, and that's why I chose to run on the Tax Wall Street Party ticket, because the Wall Street sales tax is key to put an end to this nonsense. And Dr. Sass also wants free trade. He stands for free trade, and all of his supporters stand for free trade that are backing him. And I want to roll back free trade in an orderly way while stopping any free trade deals. I want open, robust trade with all countries of goodwill, while protecting our national security, our jobs, our industry, and our farms and ranches. And Dr. Sass isn't concerned with infrastructure, but I'm the growth candidate. I'm the 21st century infrastructure candidate. And I have a plan to get America's infrastructure from a barely passing D-plus grade given by the American Society of Civil Engineers. I want to bring that D-plus grade to an A grade by tapping the productive potential of the Federal Reserve's credit power. We can mobilize the Fed to issue credit to states and municipalities to rebuild and improve infrastructure, and I think that's very important.
That's excellent, and it's very powerfully stated. Now, you're obviously a formidable candidate. How can people learn more, and how can they help? I know you need money, and I know you need help to gather signatures, so let's go through that.
Thank you very much, Webster. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I really do. I hope that your listeners will agree with me and support me at danfornebraska.com. And then you can follow me at Dan Burdorf for U.S. Senate on Facebook. You can find that at Facebook/Dan for Nebraska. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dan for Nebraska. And on my website, you can find information on how you can support me. There's a lot of critical ways that I need support.
And the contributions. Let's go through that because the Army travels on its stomach, as always.
Uh-huh. Well, I want to contrast who gives Dr. Sass money and who gives me money. Dr. Sass is looking for a chance to vote for the warmongers and neoconservatives that give him money. And he's eager, and I'm quoting from his website, he's eager to, quote, decimate our enemies. He's already making threats against Iran and Syria, and he wants to expand the anti-Russian missile defense into Ukraine. He's spoken about this in debates and on the campaign trail. And I'm looking for economic cooperation and diplomatic cooperation with countries of goodwill. My plan is that I would look favorably on countries that have helped us in the past to join in negotiations for peace with Israel, for peace in the Middle East, and for an end to the war on terror. And we can create strategic partnerships with influential countries.
We'll get you back in just a second to wrap up, but I would also think that Nebraska, not so much of an interventionist place, right? The idea of decimation, I think people in Nebraska realize decimation is maybe not a one-way street, it may be a two-way street, and you don't want to go down that street. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington again this week, and we're on the line with Dan Burdorf, candidate for United States Senate from Nebraska on the Tax Wall Street Party ticket. And what I'd ask you to do now, Dan, is we should use a few more minutes. Let's talk about where your campaign stands right now. What are the deadlines? And if people who may want to volunteer and come and help you gather signatures or volunteer in other ways, because I think in this audience we may find more than a few who are excited by this and by this perspective. That would be one thing. And the other one I want to ask you again is this question about Sass talking about himself even 20 years ago as the anointed 45th president of the United States. And what can that mean? And have we learned anything more about that?
What people can do, I'd really ask people to go to my website, learn more about me there. If you agree with me, support me at danfornebraska.com. And again, you can follow me at Dan Burdorf for U.S. Senate on Facebook, and you can find that at Facebook/Dan for Nebraska. And you can also follow me on Twitter. And you can find contact information on those different avenues.
Okay.
And what I'm looking for right now is also support, like you suggested. We could use some experienced petitioners to help us in Nebraska. We're in an uphill fight. We're David versus Goliath with these two major parties we're challenging. And I've only been speaking about Dr. Sass because he seems to be the biggest danger. And what we could use is some people to help us with our petition effort. We've got to reach several thousand signatures by August 1st. We have to have that turned in to the Secretary of State's office. This is our major goal now so that we can continue to fight, and we can fight all the way into November and through November, through this election period. So that's a big challenge for us, and I would definitely welcome any help from experienced petitioners who can help us. That's most welcome.
And now, how about the 45th president? Because that seems to indicate something. He doesn't care too much about Nebraska, but he's got some greater plan or plot in mind.
Well, I agree. I like Ben Sass. I'm a fifth-generation Nebraskan, and I challenge his loyalty to this state, and I challenge his loyalty to America. And I wonder if he's going to the Senate to support Wall Street or to America. I really welcome donations or any kind of help that people can give their energy or any way they can help me.
I'm just curious to get a little bit more of the flavor of the campaign. What is he campaigning on? Because what I've seen is he seems to try to outdo himself to say, I hate Obamacare, I loathe Obamacare, I detest Obamacare, I'm beside myself because of Obamacare. Is there any positive thing that he has going, or is it just pure demagogy wall to wall?
Well, I think it's demagogy wall to wall. He's trying to grab hold of those wedge issues that people care about. He's against different types of. He's against abortion. That's one of the things he wants to campaign against. He's a gun rights candidate, and there might be lots of arguments on both sides of those issues, but mostly he's using those wedge issues to try to push his image of this outsider image that he really doesn't have.
In other words, that he's not really the interface of the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and maybe Health and Human Services, but he's just a good old farm boy.
That's right. It's really hard to campaign in Nebraska on being the intersection of the CIA, the FBI, and the Department of Justice. People might be curious about that, but they probably won't vote for you for that. But if you contrast with me, I want a peace race. Okay, contrast his warmongering ideas, his idea, again, and I quote from his website, he uses the word decimate. He wants to decimate any enemies that oppose us. But I want development around the world, and I want to renew America's soft power by using good stewardship with our wealth here at home, and that means first developing our wealth and industry and bringing back good jobs to the U.S. And we can do that while still maintaining our national security. Because national security has a big economic security component that can't be forgotten.
All right. And now just a word or two about the Democrat in the couple of minutes we have. Domina, right?
Right. Well, Domina is a lawyer out of Omaha. He's got a lot of lawyer friends in Nebraska. He has, it's been suggested to me since I've been out on the campaign that sometimes, the Democrats might agree not to run a strong campaign against a certain candidate in return for the same compromise in another election. And I think if Domina wants to be considered serious, he's got to take the fight against this threat of SAS. So right now I don't see a lot of fight in Domina. I think there's a potential there that he could step up, and I hope that my campaign can encourage him to step up. But right now I don't see a lot of it. And people following the campaign are also wondering if this candidate, Domina, needs to wake up and start fighting.
Well, I would say concerning SAS that there's much more there than meets the eye, and whatever people think they know about him, I don't think they do. I don't think they've factored in this 45th president,
right,
which would be 2016, and they haven't factored in other things that they just don't know about him under that smiling saccharine exterior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And a lot of this stuff is coming out now, and it's very concerning, very, very difficult to digest for a Nebraskan. Dr. Ben Sasse is not a grassroots Tea Party candidate. He broke all records in fundraising in Nebraska and raised over $2.5 million, and only around 30% of that money came from Nebraska, from reports I've heard when I've been out campaigning. And Dr. Sasse is funded by the Club for Growth and the Senate Conservatives Fund Pact, and he's got a lot of money bundled from his former employees like the McKinsey Group and the Boston Consulting Group. And he also gets
Boston Consulting Group, and then those two groups that you've just said, right? We know that Obama worked for the Boston Consulting Group at some point, business. Sure. It's actually Romney. Romney worked for the Boston Consulting Group along with Netanyahu.
Right.
And
so I hear the music. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wonder if I could just direct people to go to danfornebraska.com one more time. I'd really appreciate support, and we need help with petitions as well if people are experienced.
Perfect.
Thank you, Webster.
Dan
I really appreciate it.
I'll repeat it in the next segment. See you next week, or one of your people. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now we're rolling along. I think we have another guest lined up. Am I correct?
Yes.
And that would be Randy Credico. Randy Credico, known to our audience from his work last year. He ran for mayor of the city of New York, first in the Democratic primary, and then went all the way to November on the tax Wall Street party line. He was, at that point, a prominent voice in one of the most important reforms that could be imagined in the United States at this time, the tax on Wall Street sales, the Wall Street turnover tax, 1% Wall Street sales tax. And now the indefatigable Credico is challenging Wall Street Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary for governor of New York. And at the present time, as I said before, if Credico does not get on the ballot, it's quite possible that there will be no challenger of any kind from inside the Democratic Party to Cuomo. So we have limited time, Randy, but please introduce your campaign and how can people relate to you.
Well, I think you pretty much said it all for me right there. It was a short infomercial. Everything you said was totally on point. We are the tax Wall Street party within the Democratic Party, and that's our leitmotif, is to tax Wall Street, that 1% sales tax that you have so articulately put out there over the last 20 years. We need that to create jobs, a bigger than an FDR-style jobs program. We need that. We have massive unemployment in this state, particularly amongst people of color, and that would be one way to revitalize the economy and to, put people to work, is to tax Wall Street and use it rather than these regressive tax, inventions that they have, like lotto games, cigarette taxes, bridge and tunnel taxes. We want to subsidize the bridge and tunnels because it's the middle class that use those vehicles into the city and out of the city, and for free transportation. We could subsidize the entire MTA system with a Wall Street sales tax statewide. We were talking about it as mayor, trying to do it as mayor. It's very difficult to do anything as mayor because the city is semi-autonomous, but the state controls everything. And Andrew Cuomo is a lackey for Wall Street interests. Lloyd Blankfein's a supporter. Ken Langone's his biggest supporter. Aldo his biggest bundler. The Koch brothers, the nefarious Koch brothers that everybody talks about, they gave him $100,000. But the Wall Street people love him. He just cut the bank tax, eliminated the bank tax.
Randy, tell us, what is the bank tax in New York State? Tell us about that. Well,
it's just whatever the taxes on the bank that the state had that was totally left out of the last budget. So it was nominal. There wasn't that much to begin with, but, for him it was an unfair tax because we were double taxing these guys who were paying taxes as citizens, and why interrupt the banking business with a bank tax? So that's gone. And there is a Wall Street sales tax. There really is one, but it just is immediately refunded. So if they'll pay a sales tax to the state, it's immediately refunded. And there's all sorts of loopholes for Wall Street and these huge conglomerates in New York State, the banks.
All right, Andy, now you got to tell us your website and how people can
here's
help.
What I need.
And then I have a question for you.
Your audience was pivotal. Your audience was pivotal in getting me on the ballot. It couldn't have done it without all the volunteers that came out, even from Nebraska, to help out this campaign because we had short time last year to get on the Wall Street party, tax Wall Street party. So if they go to the website, which is designed by my good friend Daniela Walls, it's Credico2014.com. Credico, Credico 2014.com. Help us put into effect the vision of Webster Tarpley on the Wall Street sales tax. And we're the vehicle to do it.
All right. And I urge people to take that very seriously and to think about the importance of New York and showing the flag, getting that principle out there. Just a tactical question now, Randy. I'm looking at the Washington Post of yesterday, And here we have one of their columnists, Harold Meyerson, is telling us how great it is that the Social Democratic Working Families Party has decided to ally with Cuomo in order to secure some minor concessions. And I guess that just underlines that you're really the only progressive alternative to this Wall Street regime that Cuomo has put in.
Right. Well, working family and party, they're neither. A couple of, very high-paid executives of that party run the whole show. And what they did was they made a deal with, this was like, I call him Chamberlain, because they make Neville Chamberlain look like a street fighter in negotiations. They totally bent over for Cuomo. They got nothing in return. It's all spurious and specious proposals that he made that he reneged on. And he said the day after, he says, look, you got to say what you got to say because you got to win. And he said what he had to say, and it's the big unions that support the Working Families Party, a few big unions, and Cuomo actually helped them out in some ways, and so they arm wrestled or wrestled to the ground the activists within the Working Families Party. It's divided into two, into supporting Cuomo, who really is anathema to their principles, at least their public principles. But they are a tugboat for the Democratic Party. They've always gone. They went with Chuck Schumer. They went with Hillary Clinton against a progressive pro-tax Wall Street guy in 2000 and when was it, 2006? And so they've always been with Kirsten Gillibrand, who is a big pro-bank and Wall Street senator. They're always with the establishment party, the Working Families Party, and they haven't been able to get, off of their training wheels. And Meyerson is totally wrong.
When it comes to working families, you're the real thing, and the so-called Working Families Party looks like AstroTurf or a kind of a wingman, a left wingman for Cuomo.
That's all they are. They always have been. Like I said, here they supported Schumer in how can you support Schumer in the Democratic primary in 2010? I was running against Schumer then, and they endorsed him. And so they came up with this name, Working Families Party. It sounds like a progressive, real left-wing party or whatever. It's not. It's the Democratic Party put it together like they had the Liberal Party. And so what they do is they try to survive every 4 years, get 50,000 votes. Cuomo will tell the people to vote for them now, and they'll sustain their 50,000 minimum and maintain their ballot line, and then they'll sell it. They'll sell it every 4 years. That's what they do. People contribute to them, and then they sell the line.
Randy, one last thing now. You're gathering signatures. What's the deadline? Where do you stand? How can people volunteer? Because we have people who will want to volunteer.
Okay, I'm going to tell you how you volunteer. You can either email me, creditcode2014 at Gmail, or go to the website, gmail.com. They can even call me, 212-924-6980. If you're in New York, you can help. You don't even have to be a Democrat as long as you're with someone who's a Democrat. We are doing very well right now. In the first week, we got about 4,000 signatures, and it's a 6-week period of time, which would, on average would give us 24,000. We need 15, but we're shooting for 30 or 35. So we got off to a pretty good start the first week, and I got more volunteers every single day, and there are people like Chris Reed, who's a UFAA guy, who's out there every single day getting signatures. And like I said, the last time it was your crew that got me over the top, or your supporters who got me over the top.
We thank you for that. Now, Randy, we're going to get you back in the near future and give us an update, okay? Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot,
Randy
Webster.
Credico, that's the ticket in New York State. Back in a minute. So welcome back to World Crisis Radio, our final segment already here on the 6th of June, 2014. And now to round out what we hope is increasingly a vast panorama of struggle against Wall Street and for the needs of working people worldwide, we've got to follow the Michigan situation, and that involves the Snyder regime, the emergency manager law, the looting of Detroit, and the attempt to suppress the attempted recall of Mayor Hightower of Benton Harbor, a town which has become a plantation of Whirlpool Incorporated, a Wall Street firm, of course, all the directors approved by Wall Street. So we want to get an update. Last time we tried to get Reverend Pinckney, we couldn't get him. We hoped that meant that he had been freed from house arrest, but let's go directly to Reverend Pinckney and get the update. Reverend?
Webster,
great to talk to you. Please tell us what the situation is.
It's an honor to be on your show once again. I tell you, so much has happened since last Friday when you and I were supposed to be, when I was supposed to be on. I was in court all day long. It was about a 5-hour mission. And I tell you, the judge did not make a decision on Friday. I went back on yesterday. Unfortunately, he bound me over trial. Listen to this. There was no evidence at all, this is part of the brief, that acted constituting a crime that was in fact committed by Reverend Pinckney. There was no physical evidence. There was no expert testimony. There was no statement to the police or anybody. There was no confession. There was no witnesses. There was nothing. The defendant committed these crimes, nor is there any evidence that would exclude everybody else or a possibility that 10 or 15 other people could have done it. So instead of them dismissing the charges like we anticipated, they bound it over for trial, and they're trying to rush the trial. But here's the good news. I am no longer under house arrest. I can also use my computer. We found the brief we put together shows that it was unconstitutional for them to deprive me of the use of my computer. Also, for me to be under house arrest, there was no legal reason that they could recite it was done. So it's been what you call a real struggle. Unfortunately for me, I still got to go to trial, but I'm not mad because somebody got to do it.
Absolutely, and our hats are off to you. You've taken the point under very difficult circumstances against it amounts to a dictatorship by financiers and their tools in big business to suppress, not just to suppress voting, but in this case to suppress petitioning, right? So that you can't work within the system at all.
Absolutely. And that's their plan. Their plan is to terrorize the whole community if we allow them. That's why it was so important for them to understand that we're not backing down. We're not backing down about this. We're going chest to chest, toe to toe, eyeball to eyeball with them. And whatever they got, bring it on.
And what ways do we have now to spread the word? Certainly, you better tell us about the Banco website and how
Absolutely.
People can contact you and support you. And then we ought to just a few words about ways to spread it. I'm thinking that an international dimension. European intellectuals, I think, would be highly interested in some of this stuff. But please go ahead.
Absolutely, because nobody would believe what happened here in Benton Harbor will be happening here in America. I tell them only in America. But you can contact me at bhbanco.org. That's bhbanco.org, or you can call me at 269-925-0001. That's 269-925-0001. Or, which is even more important, you can send a check or money order, whatever you have, to Banco, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. And here's the deal. We have to get to the appeal court on this issue. Right now, we need $5,000 to get the transcript and also to get to apply at the appeal court and also to pay the attorney. So we're right now, we're in need of funds more than ever before.
So these of course, are from the legal point of view, minimal expenses, right? This is simply the nuts and bolts, the wherewithal to contend in a modern court, right? You've got to get the transcript, and you have to pay for it. So I would urge people listening in to do whatever you can in supporting that, right? Because otherwise, The Democratic Party's not going to do it. And how about the American Civil Liberties Union? Have you gotten anything from them?
Well, they're going to come out and oversee the election trial August the 7th. Mm-hmm. See, they're going to determine whether we're going to have a trial, whether we're going to have an election November, I think it's November 4th, 5th, whatever it is. They're going to determine that on August the 7th when they bring in their witness to decide whether we have enough legal signatures to actually have a election. So that's what the American Civil Liberties Union is doing. They're not actually defending them; they're just watching them. That's all they're doing. But we need people to come in. We need it because it's crucial. And people, you can't do anything without resources, and that's what we lack right now. And if they want to go to my website, they can also make a donation on my website. There's the PayPal. So we're doing things, Webster. We're not standing here just doing nothing.
Okay. Now the one maybe positive thing that might indicate some hope. Representative Conyers has now been put back on the ballot in Detroit. So there's at least some resistance going on, right? Some things are not going down, but your case is a much more extreme case, and people have to remember what you were doing was legally gathering signatures to have a recall election of this guy Hightower, who is simply a tool of Whirlpool Corporation, right? An austerity enforcer.
Yes, and you're absolutely correct, and they're going to do everything within their power to protect this guy. And that's what they've been doing. Everything you could think of to protect him, that's what they're doing. You would never believe that government and these corporations will reach out and protect this black guy like they do. So it's obvious they need him for something.
And therefore, if it does get on the ballot, I think there's every reason to believe that Hightower would lose. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. He was losing 5 votes to 1 before this incident came about.
So there we have it. When faced by an election that they figured they were going to lose, these Wall Street and corporate forces essentially say, well, we're going to shut down elections. Now, that's what you had in Europe between the 2 world wars, right? People dressed in brown shirts and black shirts telling you there are no more elections. So you better do something now, dear audience, because this is where the fight is being waged. And Pinckney is, I think, showing a great deal of courage, right, out there waging this with the forces of Banco. So it's BH, right? That's for Benton Harbor, I guess, right?
Benton Harbor,
BH
that is correct.
Banco, BANCO, and .com?
.org.
.org, sorry. So it's bhbanco.org.
Right on the website.
And there's a PayPal feature, and I'm sure all the addresses and phone numbers are given there too. So this has given us a little bit of time, right? How much time do we have before the trial? Did we say?
July 21st, but we need to get the transcript within the next 3 weeks so we can go to the appeal court to stop the trial from happening July 21st.
Right. And the transcript costs $5,000. So $5,000, little enough to stop fascism in the heartland of Michigan here in the United States. Reverend, we want to keep in touch. We'll be back probably next week. See you soon.
All right.
That's Reverend Edward Pinckney of Benton Harbor, Michigan. I think a great American. So this is World Crisis Radio, June 6th. And we'll see you again next week.